Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. I'm delighted to be joined by Jeremy Snell, who is a veteran in the recruitment industry and a fellow trainer. Jeremy, good to see you. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much for inviting me on, Charles. Much appreciated.
Awesome. So, Jeremy, for people that may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in recruitment so far.
Sure. The boring bit is I've been in recruitment for 30 years. Maybe the more interesting bit is what I've been doing for the last 10 or so years. So I work as a learning and development consultant with recruitment agency owners. And then through briefings and project plans that we put together, I help to be able to upskill teams, productivity, drive more efficiency. For me, the most important element is to help people to have more fun whilst they're doing the job, because I think there's a direct correlation between being good at what you do and enjoying what you do. So if we can find ways to get good and enjoy it more, things starts to become easier, you know?
Absolutely, Jeremy. And I'm really excited for this episode because you're the first L&D person I've had on the show so far. And, I feel like by the end of every episode, I always come away at least 1% better. So, yeah, I'm really excited to get into this. Look, we've got a few topics that we're going to dive into. The first topic, when we first met I think it was last week when we first had a conversation about it, one of the first things you mentioned, and it rang true with me, was a lot of consultants these days, and recruitment business owners as well, have almost a lack of awareness about certain things that they can or can't control. And I see it from a day-to-day basis being on site with recruitment businesses. Some people call it busy work, but yeah, from your experience, talk us through, the awareness around things that you can or cannot control in recruitment then.
Deep down, people do know what they can control. There's just a human tendency to focus on the things that can give ourselves permission to moan about and acknowledge the fact maybe we can't do anything about it, but just enjoy the process of moaning. Whether we're moaning about things that may be happening in the economy, or we're moaning about things that we feel are issues that we're facing that are very special for us because of the marketplaces that we're in. We can find ourselves tying ourselves in knots, talking about things that matter, but realistically today, in terms of the things that I could do to make the future better, probably not even top 10 things to focus on, let alone top 3. Because when we start to look at what is in our control, things that are in our control, decisions that we make because of the things that we see that are outside of our control. The decisions we make as to how we approach our business development because of how we perceive the marketplace that then dictates the results from our BD. If we continue to do what we always did that worked in the past, market changes, our results are going to suffer. And if we then in the market for the lack of the results that we used to enjoy, recognizing that what's in our control is what we choose to do every single day to be able to react to the new world rather than for the old world, we end up being either resentful or bitter or just a bit of a whinge bag. And no one wants to sit next to a whinge bag. Whinge bags end up recruiting whinge bags, and they join little clubs together and they moan about things. Vape breaks together about the same moans. They spiral downwards rather than finding those who to identify what's in my control, what's in their control, and let's be a bit more positive despite the conditions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. I mean, in my last job, I got a mental health first aider certification, and it opened my eyes a lot about mental health. And I wanted to do a presentation to the company. When I done the presentation, I said, if you are going through difficulties, if the market's a bit turbulent and all the rest of it, you can go to have a vape break or go to grab a coffee. But my rule is you vent it for 60 seconds and just get on with it. For me, I used to be that type of person that would just bury all of my feelings and stuff, and I would never moan, but then I would just explode and then just would never turn up for work. Then, unfortunately, I turned into the opposite, which is what you're describing, which was I became a bit of a serial moaner. And it was just constantly, it's not my fault, this client's not coming back to me, or my best client just got acquired by this client. You just start moaning. And then people start slowly distancing themselves away from you because you're just moaning. So I feel like there's a good, healthy balance there between, look, the role is very, very stressful. You can vent it, but like you said, don't turn into a serial whinger.
Yeah, look, you're describing two extremes, right? On one end, you're a pressure cooker. You hold everything inside yourself until the lid can't take it anymore, and then it pops. Just a running tap. And if you just become a running tap, and somebody else is of the same mindset and enjoys the process of thinking about things without seeking a result or a change or a positive reflection on what's being learned, it's difficult to be in between the two things until you realise learning has a place because it can help you to a bit of a chemistry set inside yourself and feel yeah, I've had a little blow off there or event. I've got to move it from being a moan to becoming a problem. Take a couple of the things that you've said. I moan, not my fault that the client did that thing. We're not here to use mind powers to manipulate and control people to follow a process that we want and they don't want. You can be more mindful of is recognizing the early warning signs that someone may have a different plan that they wish to follow that is different from ours. Then look at the problem and think, earlier in the process, could I have been a bit more alerted to what's happening today and what can I learn from this next time? Problem, like the difference between a moan and a problem, when you moan about something, clearly something that's ground your gears. A problem is defined as being the difference between what is happening and what you would like to see. And when you can define the difference between what's happening and what you would like to see, that becomes the problem. The problem is, how do I get from here to here? And the moment it becomes a map, I get from here to here. I reduce the number of clients do that thing. In the future, I fill more jobs. Now I've got a defined problem, and then I can think of a solution. But I can't define the problem if I'm simply moaning about behaviour that I think is outside of my control.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, actually. And it kind of just reminded me of an episode I just recently recorded with Leisha Holmes, who's the host of the Recruitment podcast, where she was saying that more recruitment business owners should be qualifying people out of the industry, because in this job, there are so many things that you could follow a textbook process with a candidate or with a client. But at the end of the day, our commodity is a human being, and our human being commodities have families, friends, emotions, feelings, etc. And you could have a deal that could be going through, and then they could go to bed, speak to their other half, and go, "Do you know what? We should move to Spain." And then we spoke about this on the episode with Leisha, and then they call you the next day and go, "Look, the offer's fantastic. It's everything I ever wanted, but I'm actually going to go and live in Spain now." And a junior recruiter, this has happened to me before, I'm speaking from first-hand experience, you blow up in your head and then it ruins your entire day. And sometimes for some people, it ruins their entire week. And then that is like a domino effect. So you've kind of given a good few sort of nuggets of advice there anyways. But let's say for junior consultants and even for billing managers and founders who are managing these junior people, what advice would you have for them to, I guess, take more ownership and own that and essentially just get on with it once it's actually happened?
I'd recommend that people create two different notes in their phone. There are other makes of phone available, but in the iPhone, the app is called Notes. If I take to
same with
Notes,
Samsung.
Create a header for a note, which is called Moans. I start to put my moans into a note. And I have a little box next to it that you can do the check. I keep on listing the things that I moan about. If I catch myself moaning about the same thing more than twice in a month, to stop, identify what actually is the problem here. Because I'm forming a habit now of moaning about something that might be in my control. If I catch myself moaning about it a third time or a fourth time or a fifth time, I'm kind of heading towards being Olympic standard moaning, yet to achieve basic level problem solving skills. So I'd recommend a notebook of moans.
I was going to say that's an awesome tip.
The second one alongside it is a book of successes. if I have a set of notes of things that I've successfully navigated that were moans that have now gone to the success sheet, and got a list of my successes, brackets, this is what I was moaning about. I can start to see how my success really starts to come from my awareness of the things that I moan about, allows me to then focus on it to identify, well, what actually is the problem here? And the moment I identify the problem, I can decide, can I fix it? I want to fix it, and how long am I willing to put up with it? That's one of the killer questions. It's the same as we would ask maybe a candidate or a client. The results you're getting at the moment, how long are you willing to put up with that before you've decided enough? How long are you willing to work with that agency and find that they don't always have the quantity of people that you need to fill those bookings, or the quality of people that you need to hire for those permanent jobs, before you decide enough is enough? The moment you realise you're choosing to live in this moan, despite the fact I can clearly see the problem, either because I love it, I love the act of moaning about it, I put myself in handcuffs and decided that something that is in my control is out of my control. I've moaned about it 3 times in a month and done call to fix it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. You've just reminded me, actually. So I studied NLP when what would I have been? I don't know, it was in 2017. I'd done my NLP practitioner course, and in 2021 I got my master prac. And Ricky, who's my NLP coach, I remember one of the first times I met him when I basically wanted to set up a life coaching business, and he caught me out on certain things, and something that really stuck with me. And by the way, I don't recommend anyone say this to their other half, because it pisses my wife off a lot. Someone's sad, frustrated, pissed off, moaning, and you say you're choosing to feel like that.
Yeah.
It's true, but it pisses people off. But it's very true. I do it to myself. And sometimes my wife will take the piss and go, you're choosing to be angry. And she says it in a jokey, condescending tone. And I look at her and I go, do you know what? You're right. It is what's happened has annoyed me, and I'm right to be angry, but I can't stay in this state all day because it's affecting other things that I've got to do. And probably like yourself, over the years now, I've developed these strategies in my head to cope with these certain things. Like I said, I'd never really used to sort of vocalize it. I'd vent it off my chest, and then essentially crack on with things. And that's a very simply put way of that. But by realizing that you choose to feel a certain way is a very powerful thing, in my opinion.
I don't want to put everything into this pot, but there are many things that we are victim of that are actually choices rather than circumstances. I feel a victim of my client base, and they don't pay me enough money, or they don't pay me frequently enough, or whatever. Well, that's just what life's like doing industrial recruitment. The moment I say that, then I've disempowered myself of all of the choice that I have, that I actually choose every day to take that booking or to make that call, to agree to that price. So if I'm choosing to do that, it can't be the client's fault, it can't be the market's fault, it can't be my sector's fault, it can't be my agency's fault. It all comes down to choices that I make. This is where the kicker is, right? Because there's only 3 things that people can control. Control what they focus on, control how much effort they put into it, control how much they're willing to accept. If you focus too much on moaning about things, put more energy into moaning about what's not happening rather than putting the same energy into making something else happen, still use the calories. If you're willing to accept the fact that that's the way it is, and you start to label it as being just what it's like in IT recruitment, or that's what it's like in life sciences, or however it is that both you and I will meet recruitment agency owners, they'll tell us how special their market is. I don't know if you've worked with life science recruiters, Jeremy, but it's really special. I mean, the candidates, they're quite unique, and the clients, they're just humans.
So true.
Because they have a PhD, or just because that one building houses and is a bricklayer, it doesn't change the fact that they are basically chemistry sets on legs. And our job is to get good at interacting with other people's chemistry set.
That's a much less vulgar way of how my client first told me about the fact that they're just a human.
Okay.
But the chemistry set on legs, I'm probably going to use that because the one that I use sometimes doesn't necessarily go down well with people. But I'll tell you anyways, because why not? One of my first ever really good clients invited me to it was like the Royal Society of Obstetrics Gynecology, and it was like a really fancy place in central London. It's my first ever conference I'd been to in the medical technology space, and it was a small hall with about a dozen companies with their little stands and everything like that. And it was just me. I was 23 years old, riddled with anxiety, loads of just limiting beliefs, the lot. And my client sat down, educated me on his products, educated me on the market, and he goes, "Right, cool. Go ahead. You can go and pitch to these companies." And I had this little iPad Mini with like a presentation on it and like a bit of a demo. And I just remember saying to him, "It's like, JP, I'll be honest, mate, I'm shitting myself. Like, I'm really, really nervous because, like, you and I are very similar. Like, he played rugby and he was just a bit of a lad. And I was like, these guys, they've all got like master's degrees. They're all like really, really smart. I've got no education. Like, I don't deserve to be here." And bless him, like, it was such a touch at what he done. But he put his arm around me and he like literally got like side by my head and pointed around to everyone and was like, "Look at everyone in the room here, Charles. They've all gone and taken a shit today. Go ahead." I was like, "What?" He was like, "They're humans, mate. They don't matter. They're human beings. The minute you put them on a pedestal, you've lost. Once you realise that they're just another human being, you'll be fine." I didn't win any business that day from other people, but I tell you what, I got the reps in and I practiced really well with those people, went around, done my pitches to everyone, built relationships. And that's what matters. And it's just that mindset shift of their chemistry set on legs.
And when you know what buttons to press and which levers to pull, you don't have to go into all the dopamines and the serotonins and the oxytocins. It's just knowing that when I feel affinity to you, like I feel like we get on, oxytocin in my bloodstream. If you invest a little bit of time making me feel like you get what it's like to be me, then I feel like we're part of the same pack. If you feel like we're part of the same pack, I'll introduce you to other people that are in my pack, and it's called a referral because I feel like you're in the pack. If you do the opposite and you give me an adrenaline hit, I can't decide if I'm going to fight you or run away. You keep on pushing and you're insistent about asking me questions even though I'm at work. I then get cortisol in my blood. I start to get stressy, disengage. Ask me for a referral and I go, yeah, I'll ask around and I'll get back to you if I can think of anyone, which is just a tiny little change in the chemical feeling that I have. Has a massive impact on the results that you do or you don't generate as a recruiter.
It's such a powerful way of looking at things and just simplifying the fact that you are just speaking to human beings and that what you do and what you say will yield different results from different people. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on.
You say, how you say it, when you say it, all those things combined together either repel, and there's a time where you want to repel people, or to be able to engage and to bring them closer to us. And that doesn't always, in my opinion, get shared enough early in people's recruitment journey because they're too busy learning about products like software developers do and what's an architect and exactly is obstetrics. I need to really look into that. Stuff that, oh, it's fine. It's great that you understand the nuances of developer works. You've got to understand how human beings work. It starts with understanding how you work yourself. That's going to impact on other people. And when you recognize how you impact on other people, you can start to have a more positive impact on more other people. It helps you to achieve mutually agreed goals between you and your candidates or your clients.
Yeah, that's another like nugget of wisdom there, because one of the only things my last boss said that was positive, just going to leave it there, was to a group of trainees who came in. They were learning cybersecurity. Even me as the L&D manager of nearly 2 years, still to this day, don't really know too much about the cybersecurity industry. And he said something that stuck with me. And I tell any recruiter that I work with that is, like you said, learning about life sciences or whatever, you don't need to be an expert in your market. You need to be an expert of recruiting in your market. And I had a debate with an ex-colleague of mine when we both done medtech, obviously. He'd done dental and orthopedics. And we were tasked with like doing a presentation on something that we've learned to kind of do like a L&D type of presentation to our peers. And he was talking about, and by the way, he was a very blue personality. He was extremely detail orientated. I was the opposite. I was a sunshine yellow, just positive, dynamic, all the rest of it. He was so on it when it came to the detail of the products. So when he was pitching a role to you, he would tell you the dimensions of the orthotics. He would tell you what materials it was, where it was sourced from, all the rest of it. Whereas when I was pitching a role, yes, I knew a little bit about the products, but I used to have like this weird way of doing it where I would really truly understand who you are as an individual, what your motivations are, why you're looking to leave. And then when I pitch a role, I'd always get you to open your laptop. And if you don't have a laptop, open up your phone, and then I would go through the PDF document with the products, go through the website, and I would always use a bit of a cheesy line of like, look, my highest level of education is level 2 in MVQ sales. I'm not the smartest. You, on the other hand, have a biomedical degree in science. You tell me about these products, but from what you're looking for, this seems to tick a lot of the boxes. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but it's like, do your job as a recruiter, understand people. You don't really need to know absolutely everything about your market.
Exactly. And people talk about, throw this thing out there about good market knowledge, but they can't really define what market knowledge is. Market knowledge is, it's kind of on the edge of what you really need to know. You really need to know about people make decisions about moving, how people make decisions about who they join, and just understand. Look at a job description. How do you know if it's right? When you go for an interview, how do you know that this manager is going to be the right person to inspire you rather than to limit you? Do you help people to their own assessments? Well, how am I going to know that? Now got more clarity that when they meet that manager, I know what I'm looking for. Because otherwise, I'm just being briefed on a job description that's being compared to my CV. A recruiter who's chasing CVs and trying to place them into job descriptions makes less deals compared to the person who engages with human beings, puts them into the right environments where they feel as though they're going to flourish. It takes a little bit more sophistication. It's like I'm moaning here, Charles.
Put it in your phone, put it in your notes.
Phone in the phone. Second time this month I've moaned about recruiters. There's a big problem out there.
Last question before I move on to the next topic for you. There seems to be a lot of people that post about different generations in recruitment on LinkedIn, right? I'm so on the fence about this, to be honest. Like when I got into recruitment, any director, founder above me in 2014 would always complain about millennials, right? And when I got into recruitment, I don't think I was even on Instagram yet, but social media was obviously completely just booting off. LinkedIn was like really doing well at that time. But we were told that we were a lazy generation, and now I'm coaching predominantly going into businesses, new starters. If I'm coaching new starters, they're Gen Z. Now, a lot of millennials, unfortunately, and generations above will say that the Gen Z are weaker, they moan more, they don't work as hard, etc. Curious to hear your thoughts on that.
No, like ever since Moses, I'm sure there's been one generation looking at the next and going, not as, or they are more. Every time one generation talks about another, they can't help but use comparative referential indexes, which means picking a playing field where they feel that they, in their opinion, are more superior, and therefore the other is inferior. But they're not looking at the places where they've got the strengths because maybe they've got the weakness. Does that make sense? So everyone's comparisons will always be, I feel I have the higher ground. Where do I feel I can criticise? Not have a stone thrown back at me on that subject. So I think how people get those references is fundamentally flawed. It's driven by bias. The other thought that I have on it is, well, those who are Gen Z, product of their upbringing, so it's probably the generation before who created them, actually has led to them having certain expectations of privilege, certain thought processes that revolve around work ethic, Like if you're a kid and you're 9 and you say, I want an iPhone. No, you can't have one until you're 10. But then when you're 10, you get £1,000 computer that sits inside your palm. You're not going to feel like you're privileged. That's just normal, right? But if somebody, when I was 9, gave me a computer that would sit in the palm of my hand, I wouldn't even know what it was. I'd think it was a compact mirror. And I wouldn't be able to do anything with it anyway, because no one else has got one. I remember being like 19, getting my first mobile. I couldn't do anything with it because no one else had one. It was like all the glory and just carry it with a big battery. So that we would consider to be, they don't know how lucky they are. We're quite right. We don't know how lucky they are, but we've also brought them up in a world where we haven't shown them how to be able to appreciate things or how to work for things. So everything becomes instant gratification. Education system hasn't been designed to be able to deal with that because it hasn't changed in 100 years until they arrive at work, that there is anything which challenges the things that they have taken for granted as to this is how you behave. Like, you can't talk to me like that. You can't ask me to do that. I feel uncomfortable with this. If it takes me until I'm 21 to actually have somebody say no, it's going to be tough. And that doesn't mean don't hire these people. It means think about how you onboard people so that they start to adapt to a world of work rather than having expectations that kids today should behave like the kids of yesterday. This is opinion, right? There's zero science, zero white papers that I'm crediting with this. This is just what I see. Someone thinks I'm wrong. Well, I am. Open to be influenced in any direction on it. Just the way that I see it. And I think that 2020 was 4 years ago. You are 21 today. 4 years ago, you were 17. I think about the life lessons I was having at the age of 17 in farmers' fields and in central London at 2 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? I don't have to be that explicit. It was taken away from some of these people in their really formative years of that part of their teenager phase that 20 they couldn't do that, and 2021 it was probably still a little bit like, oh, I don't know. And therefore there's more anxiety associated with social interactions. So we have a chronological age in that bracket, which is probably 3 years ahead of the emotional development of those people. So we've got 14-year-olds living inside the body of 17-year-olds. I think that's nice to imagine being them. That doesn't mean I feel sorry for them. It's what it is. I can't moan about it. I can see what the problem is. And I think that this PLC, or however we want to put it, needs to step up and do something about it rather than just moan about it. Because I think we'll forever have that. There'll be this window of people that have taken longer to come to terms with what life is like in the work world, that I almost call the real world, but they may not see it as being the real world because they've had 21 years in what they think is the real world. I'm preaching now, Charles.
No, you raise so many valid points, and it always really winds me up when I hear people say all X, all Y, because it's not all. I've worked with some Gen Zers, right, who have got incredible work ethic, who are good at picking up the phone and calling. But then there are some other people that are Gen Z that, struggle to pick up the phone. They're kind of not as great at getting metaphorically punched in the face and then getting back up again because of a lot of the things that you've just said. I really genuinely think that they bring a lot of different things that other generations can't, but it's pretty much down to the business owner and to the managers that are going to hire those people to, and this is what I said at the start, to just be really, really real with them. And essentially, you sell the job, you sell the company, you sell recruitment, but then you have to sell against it and just say you could go out and get another job for 30, 40 grand a year and it will be a heck of a lot easier. And I can't remember who it was that I spoke to about this recently. It's somebody that is going to be coming on the show soon. But they basically just said exactly that and said, you can work in recruitment and you're going to feel like you're getting beat up every single day. You're going to go home, you're going to question your own existence because you've been told to F off numerous times. But in a year's time, you'll have enough money for a deposit on the house. You'll have all the confidence. You're going to learn all these skills, all the rest of it. You just need to be willing to graft, firstly, be resilient and basically metaphorically get punched in the face numerous times a day and just learn. Because that's what recruitment is. I've been in it 10 years and I'm still learning every single day. But I think sometimes people come into this and then just think it's just going to be an easy ride and I'm just going to earn loads of money.
It's how it gets teed up. It's how it's consumed, being shared with them. People have got a great way to be able to filter out stuff they didn't want to hear. You can talk about how tough it's going to be, but all they'll remember is deposit on a house in a year. You know, like everything else was present, but it just went quack, 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 deposit on a house in a year, quack, 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 quack. Nice social life, quack, quack. You know, I'll create my own distortions, find the truth that I wanted.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
It's a difficult one.
Me in the face. Yeah, it is difficult. And I think we need to be a bit more rigorous with our patience with people. Have more clarity on exactly the journey that we're going to go on. I think more of them would with the ride if they felt as though they could see the light at the end of the tunnel. They could see the light at the end of the tunnel because we've created a series of gates to say, do this period of time and you'll achieve this gate. This gate is the beginning of being able to do this for this period of time that gets you to this gate. And when you get to this gate, then Paul is we're nearly there, right? You're just running a marathon and you can see the markers and you can track your journey and you can start to take it down into more manageable. Mile I'll run at this pace and then I'll see how I feel after that mile and then the next mile and the next mile, because you know that it's 6 point whatever miles. When you start in recruitment, it's an infinite game. Good at it is directly linked to how you're willing to put up with being shit at it. There's a balance, right? You've got to be willing to be shit at it for long enough that you actually get good, whilst at the same time you've got to be impatient enough that you're not willing to be shit at it forever. Otherwise you'll go and do something else and you'll miss all of your potential. And that's onboarding people to say, this is what we would estimate is approximately the amount of time you'll be shit at this job. However, it's not the time that matters, it's what you do in the time. Focus on, it's the energy that you put into it and what you're willing to accept. And go control the controllables.
I was going to say, it ties into your first point about controlling the controllables. And that really, I was smiling there because it rings true. When I joined Projectus, I'd done perm recruitment for 5.5 years. I came from doing like temporary nurse recruitment, which I might offend people. I'd done it for 2 years. It wasn't a lot of brain power. I'll put it that way. It was very hard because the hours, I literally had to work 24 hours a day. I was on call and I used to take calls at 3 o'clock in the morning if a nurse fell sick and I had to rebook the shift. It's a bit of a nightmare in that respect. But when I joined Projectus and I came into build a new market, it was perm recruitment, it was different. I'll never forget they had Cube 19 on the TV and it said Charles Kiriakou Zero. That was on my first day and I remember it pissed me off. But I was day one, right? But I know whenever I speak to recruiters now that have that mindset, I'm like, that's good because I'd rather have someone I can rein in than have to stick a rocket up their ass. But I told myself that I'm probably not going to do any revenue for my first 3 months. If I did a deal in my first couple of weeks, brilliant. But realistically, to get really good at this, I'm going to have to sacrifice my ego and be willing to be shit for the first 3 months. And I made it my mission to go out with every single big top biller, all the most successful senior consultants there, took them out for lunch, was like, tell me how you do this, tell me how you're so good, what's your process, what's your strategy, etc., etc. I'd done a deal on my second week. It was a split deal. But then I didn't do a deal for about 3 months, 4 months. And my boss sat me down and basically what happened was, Jeremy, I wasn't doing the controllables. I had so many limiting beliefs and so much anxiety in my life when I was 23 that like I was saying about, they have a biomedical sciences master's or they have a PhD, I was looking at that on their LinkedIn profiles and not making the call because I had all these demons in my head. And as soon as I got past those demons and I realized actually I can do this, I realized that I'm not going to accept being shit anymore because I've done this for 3 months. I just need to do the controllables, stop moaning, crack on with the job, be myself as well, which I was suppressing for the first 3 months. And as soon as I realized I could just be me, and people probably like me because I'm just being myself, I'm not trying to be someone else. And then all of a sudden, new business deal after the other. I got Newcomer of the Year award that year, Business Developer of the Year the next 2 years, etc. So it's a journey, man. Like you said, it's an infinite marathon. It never ends, and you're always learning, you're always growing, if you obviously want it, of course.
But despite it being the infinite game, you can set those milestones to say, in 3 days I'm going to be here. Get to here in 3 days, then I know that I'm this percentage into the plan. The measuring devices that you create that keep you on that path, you focused on doing the right things to the right standard rather than being distracted by noise. And there's loads of noise in recruitment, probably more in than there is any other type of recruitment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, one of the other topics we were going to talk about is something that when I first got into recruitment, it kind of scared me, the word strategy. I don't know why. Whenever I hear people talk about strategy, I think of people in a boardroom with suits and I just start overthinking things. I don't know why. That's just something that comes up in my head. But I recently done a video about a business development strategy, for example. And I spoke to another coach, actually. She was an ops director for about 8 years. And we had a long conversation around a very simple, effective BD strategy. But when we first met a few weeks back, you mentioned about, essentially just a sales strategy or a recruitment strategy for businesses. Yeah, talk us through kind of what you think is, I don't know, an ideal sort of strategy or what the best starting point would be for consultants or businesses.
Probably not that different from anyone else's version, because a strategy should be which overarches everything else that you do. So for me, a good quality sales strategy, a good quality BD strategy revolves around 3 critical components. We sell it to, get it in front of them. We break it down into those 3 components. Strangely, not enough time gets spent on the first component because the business is so fluent with what it sells, it doesn't feel the need to define it to itself. So because it doesn't define it to itself, it finds it difficult to be able to define it to people outside of the business. And it starts to get interlaced with all sorts of assumptions. Plenty of people who get stuck, probably someone's stuck right now. Picture this, there's 7 consultants stuck right now in a sales call because the client has said, should I work with you? They've gone, it's a good question. Refer you to our website. You go, because we are significantly better recruiting. It's not fluid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Try and orate a pitch without actually knowing what actually do I sell. I don't mind what people have decided that they sell. There's a place in this world for very transactional recruiters. There's a place in this world for highly strategic and consultative recruiters. All things in between. So I'm not snobby about retained, not retained, exclusive, and all of that kind of thing. Your business is your business, and it should be fit for purpose for a certain audience. You've structured it the right way, and you have decided deliberately that this is my product and this is my audience. You should also make sure that you can make a profit. So just because someone says, you do it for 12%, you're devaluing the industry. Dude, if their business makes more money than yours does, but you're doing 25%, you might want to have a look at that rather than get snobby about your price point. But anyway, you know what they sell. The core of what do we sell has got to be these are the problems that we're fixing. The eloquence of what they sell is how clearly they can communicate this is the problem, then this is the fix, and look how well it fits together. So getting that right takes a lot more thought than most businesses put into it. Then deciding who's going to buy it, simple as who's going to buy it. We actually feel that we could serve with this. And lastly, where the tactics starts to roll out more is how do we actually get it in front of them? How do we pull together all of the different channels that we've got at our disposal to create multi-threaded, multi-touch for each process, or without the adoption of technology, with or without automation, with or without AI, to start to make sure that the right people in the right organizations get the right messages at the right time. Do everything that we can to make it easy for them to say yes. To all of our competitors probably arriving at a point where they're making it difficult to say no. And if we're the ones who make it easy to say yes and everyone else is making it difficult to say no, deal with the hesitations and we can start to onboard the clients. That's it in a nutshell.
I love it. Like I said, for me, whenever I heard people talk about strategy when I was a lot younger, I don't know what it was. I just used to get freaked out, but no one has really explained it in such layman terms like that. And that really, really makes a lot of sense to me. Something that you mentioned there that comes up so often for me as a coach and as a trainer is when a consultant is on a call with a client and the client says, why should we use you? I feel like the number one go-to thing that every recruiter says these days is we're specialists. And my response to that when a consultant, like if we're doing a role play, is, okay, and what does that mean for me? And largely it means that, they say something along the lines of, it means that everyone in our database is a X. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean for me? And they still can't really explain why being specialist is a benefit for me. They can't really understand, they don't really understand what the advantage of that actually is. And I feel like so many companies these days feel like that is good enough to have as just a sole unique selling point. I guess from your perspective, this kind of ties into a strategy, into like a pitching strategy or something like that. What's your advice, or what experience do you have when it comes to formulating a pitch and how to present that said pitch?
I would prefer to move away from the word pitch. What I would like to pitch is where I throw something and someone decides if they want to catch it. My definition of the pitch. Match, where I've invested a bit more time to be able to make sure that it the right velocity and it goes in the right direction and they actually want to catch it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
At the last minute, they might go, "Whoa, I don't want to catch that." So I would rather talk about a match. So if somebody says, "Should I work with you?" I'm feeling super cheeky. The answer might be, "I don't know." If I ask you 4 or 5 diagnostic questions, I think I'll get closer to the answer. The answer may even be, "I might not want to. Let's give it a go." Do you see what I mean? So that some people package it as being stupid, others think it's amazing, but that whole sell me a pen. Someone starts rattling on about the lid and the quality of the ink, pitching. Somebody says, "Talk to me about your use of pens and tell me how you actually go about making a decision as to whether it's worth using this one, that one, or the other one, because I've got a felt tip pen and I've got this whiteboard pen." There's pens and there's pens and there's pens. There's clients and there's clients and there's clients, and there's recruiters, there's recruiters, there's recruiters. And for every donkey there's a stable. That doesn't mean that every client is the stable for me. And I'm not the donkey for all of them either. So I need to do my due diligence and you need to do your due diligence, but probably somewhere in the region of 12 minutes, we'll both have more clarity on whether we should work together or not. For me, it's about the match, Charles.
I like that quite a lot, actually. And the guest that I had that I recorded this morning, he's a phenomenal business developer, and I've seen him pitch, I've seen him match, but he does exactly what you just explained, and it's very similar to how I do it, where it's very diagnostic. It's a lot of open questions, really, really digging into all of their answers to really, truly understand, is this actually going to be the correct match for both of us? And that's how I operate nowadays. When I go and meet clients, I always say to them, I'm going to understand your business, your values, etc., etc. and I'll determine whether I think you're a good fit for me, and you're going to determine whether I'm a good fit for you, because you could get to the end of this discovery meeting and go, do you know what, Charles, I don't think you're a right fit, and that's fine. And I sometimes will get to the end of it and go, I don't know if I can really work with this business, right? But when it gets to the actual sell, because a few of my clients will say, you know, there's not enough of you in the office. I'm not hearing you guys, and they say pitching, but they don't hear enough of the recruiters selling the company and what we offer and all the rest of it. What about then when you have the diagnostic, or you have done the diagnostic, sorry, you've really, really, truly understood, and you're in now a position as a recruiter that this engineering vice president or the CTO or whatever, they've told you all these things and you're like, my gosh, what I do really, really fits what you're looking for. How do you then go around selling your services? Do you have like a specific methodology for that? Or yeah, how would you go around actually to the point when you're going to sell the company services?
I feel that I've done my diagnostics and I would consider to be everything that I need to be able to do that. I pick up my every conversation that I have, I don't know if that stands out enough, but I've drawn this little rectangle in the bottom right hand corner. The start of my diagnostics is I make sure I've got that space which is free. Only write things in there that are emotionally charged for the client, either positive or negative. Things that matter to them, either positive or negative, that is linked to the future of their business, reflections on the past, and their perceptions that revolve around their recruitment process. I write in that box all of the things that are those. I begin my matching process when that box is 2/3 full. Because I know that what I have now is a visual aid to help me to make sure that, despite the fact we've been talking for 30 minutes, have I actually gathered anything that is going to help me to be able to show you the relevance of my match? It's me earlier in the conversation focused on asking the right questions because I can see stuff going into the box. And then when I've got it in the box, I can use the box in the match process, which starts with a summary. When I say to them, look, I just want to summarize back what I think are the most important messages here. And as I summarize it back to them, I'm into, some might call an agreement staircase, at least into some kind of feeling significant because I'm genuinely showing them I've paid attention in these half an hours. These are the things that I pulled together. It helps me to be able to test my perceptions against their intentions. And I can say, based upon what we've gone through, what I would consider to be the most critical reasons why you should consider working with us. And I'll then show them how to help them to achieve emotional outcome, business goal, or how I can protect them from some of the things that perhaps have been past frustrations. It becomes a bit of a balance sheet presentation. Take us to a point where the actual close part becomes kind of easy because I get their confirmation. Does that sound as though a fair fit for what you've described, or anything that could stop us having an agreement now to be able to move forward? There is or there isn't.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
It's a human interaction. It needs to have a process behind it, but so much of it is again about that. That's why I'm logging what I would consider to be emotional responses, and I share with the recruiters a set of shorthands. There's different symbols that you can use for different emotions so that you can start to convey it in the right way. That helps the other person to feel like truly seen when they've been seen rather than sold at. It makes it easier to say yes rather than difficult to say no. You get overly fixated with using logic. Logic is only going to be required post the emotional commitment, because that's what seals the lid to make sure there's no buyer remorse.
Yeah. I always say to people in training that people will buy on emotion and pay on logic. And you see it all the time in like car showrooms. People are like, oh my God, this Porsche is amazing. This is exactly what I've always wanted. And then they'll speak to their husband or wife, and then, yeah, like, what am I thinking? I can't afford this. Why am I getting it? But they're emotionally bought in. But from everything you've said, Jeremy, and I'm sure you've got a load of content on this type of stuff, but I would definitely recommend recruiters and even business owners as well to upskill themselves on just speaking to people, like how to speak to people, how to influence people. That's one of the reasons why I got into NLP when I was like, 23, 24 years old when I first met Ricky, because I noticed that, well, first and foremost, one of the top billers at the time literally done a presentation on how NLP helped him get from X to Y. But when I actually started to go to the hypnotic language pattern classes on a Saturday and a Sunday and advanced rapport building and things like that, I started to realize that, oh my God, there is certain things that, well, I say naturally, but there's certain things that, because of the way I was brought up in a Mediterranean household, we're quite animated people. I always had people in the house. I was quite comfortable speaking to people. But when I actually realized that there were certain patterns of language that could influence people's subconscious, and when you're meeting people, stuff to do with your body language, if you're like mirroring and matching and stuff like that, I think that's one of the reasons why I done quite well in recruitment, and obviously doing quite well now as a coach. But I would just say that for people listening that want to be successful in recruitment, like, you can nail the recruitment process, but if you're terrible with people, I don't know. I think you could struggle, to be honest.
Want it enough, you find a way. Are people I know who are introverted and comfortable in the presence of other people, do very well recruiting people who are introverted and uncomfortable in the presence of other people, right? Because it creates rapport. And the oxytocin kicks in, right? This guy's just like me. Both went on a Zoom and neither of us used the camera. It was just so comfortable. Went to a networking event that he hosted, and he didn't ask us to introduce ourselves to each other and share a fun fact. I didn't have to crawl up my own backside. That guy's just so me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
You know who you
Yeah.
are. You have that self-awareness to recognize the impact that you have on others. Chemistry sets on legs. It starts with understanding, how do I operate and how do I calibrate me, and then how do I find my tribe out there.
I want to say one thing on what I just said, by the way, because listeners may think what I just said is, well, we all just need to be like Charles and be bundles of energy. No, what you've just said, the top biller at my old company is a guy called Akbar. Last year, I'm pretty sure he billed 500k whilst managing a team of 15 people. That's just next level, right? He is a very introverted character. And in the office, his level of focus was just uncanny. I used to be just the biggest wind up in the office, right? I'd sit there, poke him in the ear, going, "Come on, Akbar, we're going to Nando's, we're going to Nando's." And he wouldn't realise I was poking him on the shoulder. And sometimes I'd hear him on a call, and he just didn't sound like he was selling. Like, he just didn't sound like a stereotypical salesperson. But what he was masterful at, and to this day he's masterful at, is, like you said, he had the self-awareness to understand from a young age what his strengths were, which was unbelievable focus, unbelievable questioning techniques, and an ability to just ask a question and shut up, which for the longest time was my biggest problem. Was my director had to push the red button on the phone when we used to have hard phones, because I'd ask a question and answer it, which a lot of recruiters will do. So now I'm very, very conscious, to the point where sometimes it's too much, where I try to just listen. But he was not extroverted at all, but he understood people. He was a very good active listener, had good empathy, but his questions were, and his level of focus and his questions were just what made him, and to this day probably still makes him, an elite level recruiter.
Yeah. It is much the self-awareness. I say this to managers sometimes, that can sometimes be frustrated with another person because what they're trying to make is a mini them. Start with thinking about, how do I feel, how do I behave, what do I sound like? So their frustrations of, needs to be a bit more animated on the phone, or she needs to be a bit more expressive and a bit more willing to push. No, that's if she wants to become you. We're trying to help her to become the best version of herself at this job. She becomes a top biller rather than becoming the second best version of you, which is a non-biller. Flourish. So we're not here to fix people. People aren't broken. We're not here to train people how to have a personality that they haven't got. We hired them for who they are, and we should develop them to succeed for who they are. And when I worked at Spring Technology, there was, I don't know, maybe 800 people in that business. They did psychometric profiling of the top 25 billers in the company to try and improve the quality of hiring. And they did 25 psychometric profiles and came up with 25 blueprints for what good looks like, because every single one was different. There was no commonality in the Thomas International tests, the DISC test, to be able to say, even like a third of people are like this. Me working in L&D as part of the HR team, see that each of the people that they assessed that was a good biller, exactly who they were, where their strengths lie, they played to their strengths. They worked in a way that helped them to be authentically themselves, not worry about what other people thought. Really empowering, I think.
I think so as well. It really reminds me when I first joined Projectus, we had an L&D consultant called Pippa who used to come in like once a month, and she was just like, whenever she came in, she'd always bring in like a bunch of cappuccinos or some lattes, and it just was just the energy in the room was like amazing whenever she used to come in. But bless her, she sat down with me and she was listening to one of my phone calls, my live phone calls. And as soon as I finished it, she was trying, obviously I didn't understand what an L&D consultant was or what a coach was back then, but she was just like, how do you think the call went? And I was like, yeah, I think it was okay. And she was like, I just want you to do me a favor and just listen to Simon, listen to Akbar, listen to David, and listen to how they do calls. And all three of them were very similar in respect that they were really cool, calm, collected, confident in how they spoke. And I just remember looking around and going, I can try that, but that just seems so alien to me. And she was like, well, look, in your market, you've got to be, just smooth. And I was like, oh, okay. So I tried it and it just felt so icky and just like, it just didn't feel like me. And then she left for the day and I went to lunch with my mate Akbar, and he turned around to me and was just like, I noticed when you're on the phone to people, you laugh a lot. And I was like, right, okay. And he's like, could be deemed as quite unprofessional, mate. So I'd probably just nip that in the bud. And at the time, I just remember thinking, they're all just basically saying who I am is shit. And I was like, I don't know, but I just feel like I was successful in my old job being who I was. I don't think I understand the process yet, and I'm just rushing my questions, but I'm going to maybe take snippets of what makes them successful and then just do it my way. So rather than speak a million miles an hour and Jeremy, I need to, I was like, let me just use what Simon does and slow it down a little bit. Rather than just going over and doing none of the detail, let's do what David done and takes, be a little bit more detail. Rather than answering the person's question, Akbar would ask a question, shut up for 5 minutes and let them speak. Let me just take a little bit of that. And then I still done my laughs in between. I still had a bit of my hyperactive, silly, jokey sort of personality traits in there. And it worked. And it's just one of the old-fashioned things of just like when you start in a company, pick tiny little things from people and then merge it into your own. Don't be like Jeremy. Don't be like Charles. Don't be like whoever. Just take things from them and then make it your own.
It's the authenticity of voice.
Yeah.
Cool.
100%. Well, listen, we are pretty much running out of time. There was a few things, but hey, we might well have you back on the show in the future. But the last question I always finish off with is, following today's show, what can listeners take away to be 1% better in recruitment?
Choice. Of these two things, I think it's just like a superpower, right? Thinking about people in terms of chemistry sets and actually deciding, how do I want this person to feel? Like, you imagine starting a phone call with somebody, you get good at calibrating how they feel at the beginning, so maybe they feel irritated. And you know that you need to take them on a journey of feeling confident and grateful. How to map out what you need to do to take someone from irritated to confident and grateful. Chemistry of irritated, the chemistry of confident and grateful. You don't have to know the names of the endocrine parts of the brain that release those or the labels that are associated with it. Just think about the chemistry of people. And the second is moaning, like just moaning for prolonged periods of time. Allow yourself to moan, put it in a notebook, phone, yourself moaning again, go and put it in your notebook and go, well, hang on, that's the second time that I've moaned about candidates backing out of interviews. I need to focus on what the problem is here, because otherwise it's going to become a catalogue of moans about things that might be in my control. This is the fourth time I'm moaning about the weather. I should move to Spain.
Oh, those are awesome things.
Up and put up. Stop putting energy into moaning about stuff and put energy into fixing stuff.
Yeah, love it. I always used to say when I was doing training, obviously you can see behind me I've got like my PlayStation sign. I've been playing video games since I was like a little kid. If you've ever played video games like Street Fighter, you've got an energy bar to your side, right? So whenever you get hit, the energy bar goes down. I always used to use that as an analogy for recruiters when something happens in the day. You have a finite amount of energy throughout the day, and then you have a coffee, it goes up slightly, whatever. When something happens, you are rapidly reducing the energy levels by choosing to moan about it and fixate on it. So what you've just said there, I'm going to start doing. To be honest, I don't moan too much, but sometimes what I will do is I'll worry about something and then I'll bury it in my head. But what I used to do when I was younger is exactly the same as you, is I would write it in my phone and then I'd come back to it in a little bit and see if I had a different perspective on that. And then typically what would happen is my anxiety on that type of topic would diminish slightly. But yeah, those two things that you said, Jeremy, were actually my two takeaways: the chemistry sets on legs, and then the notes things. I'm definitely going to be using those.
Well, good. I appreciate being invited, and I hope it's useful for anyone else who's listening.
100%. Thank you very much, Jeremy. In terms of how people can reach out to you, I know you've got loads of things going on. You and I had a conversation about that. Feel free to tell people where they can reach out to you and kind of what you've got going on at the moment.
The place to start is to start at LinkedIn. My LinkedIn personal page is a bit of a navigation page. So if you've got an interest in looking at coaching or training, you can look me up for those types of things. Or if you've got questions about any of the things that I've said, or you would like to have a moan about what I've said, feel free to drop me a message and I'll help you to frame that moan into a problem.
Nice one. Jeremy, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'm very confident people will become not 1% better, but a lot % better after this show. So thank you very much.
Alrighty.